Hi guys, this is Mike back with another Python Django tutorial for you, and this time we're going to take things a little step further from our Stripe tutorial from the last time. We're going to take it from taking a single payment by credit card through to actually setting up a subscription. Now the difference between taking a single charge and a subscription is just minute really, and there's a few changes in the kind of things that you pass through to the Stripe application. But let's have a quick look at what's the same, and then we can kind of move from there. Now what's the same is that although I'm going to set up a different view for our system to do the subscription side of things, we're going to have a register, but we're also going to have a register and subscribe view. Now the register one takes the normal payment like we did in the last tutorial. The next one, the register and subscribe, sets up a subscription in the process. So because we've done that, we need to make a different template for it, and the way we do that is we just basically copy the register template, and I've copied it to a register and subscribe template here. Now if you compare them line for line, the only real differences here you'll see is that this URL at the top, or sorry, this form tag at the top is different because the place where we're posting our information is to the register and subscribe view handler and not to the register view. And the other thing would be the title at the top of the page. The rest of this stuff on the page is exactly the same, even down to including the Stripe form at the bottom and the hidden ID. So we more or less duplicated that. So I'm sure there's probably a way we could even simplify it further and make a template that would fit both situations. But for the sake of simplicity, I've just duplicated it in this case. So we've copied that over, and that's more or less exactly the same. The only thing we need to do is we need to create a new view. Now just to review what we did in our register one, we brought in information from the custom user form, excuse me. Then we used the Striped API to create a charge of $4.99 in cents, which is $4.99 US, or 4.99 cents rather. Then we use a description, we put in an email, and then we put in a Stripe ID as a card into here, and then from that we saved everything, and the user's registered and can log in with a one-off payment. With our new handler, we're basically going to do something very similar, but with different arguments to the API and a slightly different call. So what are we going to do? Let's just clear some space out. So we'll make our new register and subscribe view. As last time, we're just basically going to say if the request method is post, then bring in the information from the request post array and then validate the form. If it's valid, we're going to try to do our setup of the user and we're going to try and also set up the subscription. So here we go. The first thing is we get a copy of the user instance from saving the form, because we'll need this later, and I'll tell you why in a second. We then use a similar line to before. So we had up here, we had customer equals stripe charge dot create, and this we're going to say stripe customer create, because this time we're not just creating one-off charge, we're actually going to say we're going to retain this customer's information in Stripe for a later subscription charge and sometime in the future. So this time we're creating a customer, not a charge. The next line is that we're going to keep their email and that'll help them to be identified inside of Stripe's details. Then we're going to create or set the plan to this string. Now, how do we get this string? Well, I'll take you over into the Stripe site and we'll have a quick look. In our plans section of the Stripe system, we have a set of subscription plans, although it doesn't kind of put it that way there. So what we did originally was we clicked new, and in there we entered a string ID. Now in my case I entered in that string that we've put in there, and then I put a name for it and then a price. I picked my currency and just set it to monthly. You can have options to create this as a trial period in days. So if you want to say, I don't know, give people 14 days for a tryout of something before they actually get billed or anything, then you could do that. You could add that in there, and that would then get taken care of in the process of you creating your subscription. Then this final section is the statement description, which is how does it turn up on statements, bank statements and that sort of stuff. And in my case it turns up with such and such, and if I was to type in, I don't know, monthly plan, it would just basically tack it onto the end of there, so it would be easily identified. Now I've already created my plan, so I'm not going to do that now. I've already created my monthly access plan for £9.88, and as you can see I've got my ID in there of MMPL01, which is just something I made up. It doesn't have to be anything special, just something that's easily identifiable. If you've got multiple kinds of subscriptions on your site, you're going to need to have something that makes that look different from one of the other subscriptions. So I took this string here, and then I went to my code and added it in there. So MMPL01 is the plan I used. So that's how I identify which subscription plan I'm actually tying in this customer with. The next bit is the card. So that's the user Stripe ID. So the Stripe ID is not the same as the card detail. So you remember in the last tutorial we got a token from the site. A Stripe ID is something different. So for instance, in one of these already subscribed people, a Stripe ID looks like this: CUS underscore and then some random letters and numbers, whereas the actual token it began with TOK underscore such and such. So they are very different, so you have to be careful about what you're passing through. Then we're done, and that should then go away and create a customer object. Now this Stripe ID that we've passed in from the user is the Stripe ID that has actually been passed back from this form. So this Stripe ID here actually is the one that begins with the TOK that we saw in the last tutorial. Now what we can do next, once we've got that customer back, is change this actual Stripe ID for this user's object to the identifier that the customer has in the Stripe system. So we've got Stripe ID in our user. We don't want to save the token for the credit card person or the credit card token. We want to save the customer's ID, and the reason why we want to save that is because later we're going to use that ID to call up the customer's details from Stripe, and then we'll be able to use that in cancelling a subscription later. So a little bit convoluted. We originally start off with the token or the TOK underscore kind of token that we get from the whole authorization process from a register, that's contained in Stripe ID. But then once we've got our customer created on the Stripe system, we replace it in our user ID and save it, so that when the user logs in, we still have their customer ID for later usages, like when we cancel. In the plan section, we're just basically saying this is the plan we've subscribed them to. If we had multiple plans that we wanted to subscribe to, then we may well just basically create that as a list, or a list or a dict or something like that, and then we'd store multiple plan IDs in there. But in the case of this particular site, you can only subscribe to one plan, and then of course we save it so that the user can then log in with these details saved. So then we redirect them off to the login so that we can get them to log in straight away after being successfully registered. And then after that, to match our try exception handling, we're just basically doing like we did before and looking for a Stripe card error to say if this call to the Stripe API actually failed or not. Then we should add this into the form errors and display it back on the registration form. Then, after we've established that this is not a request method of post, we handle what would happen when you first load the page. So this is basically the bit that is more or less the same as it was in the last handler. So we look straight up here, and we're more or less going to just duplicate that code there just to finalize the functionality of this view. So there you go, that's all the stuff that sets up the Stripe publishable, adds in the form, gives us our CSRF token, and the months and years ranges for the drop downs for when you select your credit card details. And then obviously we've got the soon value there to say what's the nearest day to select. And then finally we rendered a response, but this time we use our newly created view, and that gives us the benefit of just helping us to differentiate between that and the other register that we've created. Okay, so that gives us enough to register with and create the Stripe plan. Now obviously when we're saving this, we've got a Stripe ID and a Stripe plan. Now we haven't added that in yet, so we need to go to the model and just add in those two fields so that we've got extra information, or in extra places to save that information. So we're just going to create a Stripe ID, which is just a character field, and then a plan, and that should be enough. Now if you've followed the previous tutorial, you will already have a database, a development database in here. We are basically going to have to delete that and then run syncdb again, so that it'll take account for these two extra fields in here. If we're using something like South or the new migration system, we could probably run some other commands and not have to delete that database, but this is a very basic tutorial, so we haven't gone to the extent of creating migrations just to take account for that. So the simple and easiest way to get through all of that is just delete your development database and run syncdb, and you should be good to go. Right, so with that, we've created our views, our view rather, and then we need to add in that URL in there. Excuse me. Now what we've also added in is we've added in a logged in place. And the reason for that is because once we've actually logged in, we want a page to display something. And the reason why we want that page to display something is because on that page we're going to be able to show the button to actually do a cancellation and also a logout button. So far, in theory, I'll just check to see if we're actually running here. Yeah. So in our website, we should now have, yeah, so we've now got a subscription page. We can take in a name, an email address. I'm going to put in a new bogus email address, so Mike at, I don't know, hibbert.com maybe. Password, let me in. Again, type in our typical fake credit card number, which is 4242424242424242, and then 123, and an expiry date of something after this year. I think would probably do. That'll do. So then, if we click validate credit card, that should shoot off to Stripe, get us a token, come back and post the form. It should then register our user, create a customer account on Stripe, and then set up and set up the actual subscription on the Stripe server all in one fell swoop, and then push us off to the login page. Okay, so that should have done that. Now how do we check if it's worked? If we go to our plans and then click our monthly subscription, we should see the new subscriber there. And if we click on there, we can see the new details, and then in the events section right at the bottom we can see Mike at hibbert.com is a new subscriber or new customer, then subscribed to the monthly access plan. So that tells us we've created a customer, but we've also subscribed them to the access plan in one fell swoop. So that's worked. However, if we go back to our site, what happens if our user wants to cancel? Well, unfortunately, our users don't have the luxury of being able to go in somewhere like a dashboard or something like that, like you can do with PayPal, and cancel a subscription from there. You have to actually supply them with a cancellation option, and because of that you have to then put the button on there and perform the code that does things in the background. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is we need to create ourselves a view. Now I'm going to do the URLs first because I just need to drop in one thing. So it's a cancel subscription handler, and it's going to be views, cancel subscription in the custom user section. So under custom user views, if I just drop this down so we can see more of the code. There you go. Cancel subscriptions. Then we're going to try, when this is called, we're going to try to create or get a customer. So Stripe customer retrieve the current user, or retrieve a customer from Stripe using the current user's Stripe ID, which is what we saved before. So do you remember we went up to here. If I can just get my scrolling to work properly. So we went up to here, we saved the user, which had the token version of the card ID, which we used to create a customer. But then once we got that customer object back, we replaced the user's Stripe ID with the customer ID, which is that CUS underscore value, and saved it. So then now that we're here, we can use that customer ID to retrieve the customer from Stripe's system using the API. Then the next bit is just basically to use that customer object that we've retrieved and call its cancel subscription option and add in an extra value saying at period end equals true. Now what does that mean? If for instance you've got a monthly subscription like my subscription was set up, it basically tells the system when you cancel this subscription it's not an immediate cancellation, which, you know, if it was immediate it would cut them off right here right now and they wouldn't be subscribed at all. It's probably a better idea to cancel the subscription and give them to the end of the month to still access the system, because obviously they've paid a month in advance. It's a bit of a bad thing if you're going to chop them off right there and stop them accessing the system that they've paid a month's worth of money already. So this basically says at end of month equals true, and that's saying this subscription ends at the end of this particular period that I'm billing for, and in my case that's a month. If it was you know, if you had set a number of days or a number of months, then it would be the end of that period time that you'd selected instead. And then we're just going to do another check to see if there's any exceptions that happen, because once we call this there may well be an exception, and if there is, we're just going to use messages. Now messages is something that you may well have seen in one of the other tutorials that's available on the site, and if you haven't then go and check those out, they're really handy. But what it basically does is it puts a nice little message at the top of the page to feed back to the user what went wrong after the cancellation happened. Not sure why that's in there, I think I was just messing about. But the final part of that is just to basically render or use render instead of render to response in this case. And the main reason why I'm doing that is because I'm not really passing any arguments. I could probably pass arguments with render, but it just seems more sensible to just keep it nice and simple on that line. So we're rendering the logged in page. So basically the cancellation of the subscription just basically goes away, gets your customer's details based on that Stripe ID we've saved, and then cancels the subscription. So with that we should then be able to go back into our system, log in, let me in, I think it was my password. Yep, there we go. And we've got two options here. Now how did I do that? On my logged in page I just created some basic HTML for the page to surround it, but then I created two hyperlinks, and the first one goes to the cancel subscription URL, and that's a button danger, which is the Stripe sorry, not the Stripe, the bootleg kind of CSS setup, so that makes it look like a button. And the second one is a log out button. So very simple, I didn't have to do anything special just to get those nice buttons on there. And what should happen is if we go back to our events section here, we should, if we click that cancellation button, we should see that subscription cancellation message come up there. So let's just test to see if that works. There you go. I could well have put a message on here saying that was successful, and it's probably a good policy to do that, but in this case we're going to check in the actual back end, so we'll be able to see whether it happened or not. Okay, so there we go. You can see there, Mike@hibbert.com's subscription has been set to cancel at the end of the billing period. So in my case that was a month. So at the end of that month, that should then get cancelled. Okay, so as you can see, it's pretty simple to set these sorts of things up, and if you know how to do a basic payment, then it's not that much farther to actually work and make yourself a nice little setup for creating subscriptions as well. And as you can see, the main code actually is only about 7 or 8 lines long, so not a massive big leap, and certainly not a lot of coding to actually get yourself set up in a way that you can take subscriptions. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and if you need any assistance, please feel free to contact us by email and I'll see if I can help you out. Thanks for watching.